Members of this divine society come together periodically to conspire for the good of the whole. Thus, whatever their particular local dharmas might be, each adept shares with every other adept a common vitalizing vision, namely to aid humanity through its chaotic, turbulent times in such a way that it helps individuals and nations to self-correct and to reestablish the reign of justice on earth. In a simple way, then, these meetings at ULT San Diego are a fledgling attempt to emulate the august society of bodhisattvas and sages. It seems apparent that those that attend these Saturday occasions on a regular basis are moved by a genuine desire to listen, to question, to learn, and to practice the teachings. This multifaceted, holistic attitude fuses both the listener and the practitioner degrees, said to be prevalent in all wisdom schools across the globe. We are necessarily engaged in contemplating ideas, my friends, sifting their meanings, and seeing how they might illuminate our daily orbits of responsibility and our use of leisure time. This is infinitely worthwhile, and it must necessarily have a replenishing and clarifying effect on the mindset of mankind and of nature. So we come together to commune for a while around an Aquarian theme and leave the meeting spiritually and intellectually refreshed and resolved to continue our quest for insight into wisdom and compassion. Jonathan is going to be presenting to us on Guru Yoga, but before he does, I'll read the theme for the week from the Almanac. One will seek an absolute fidelity and purity of heart towards one's spiritual guru and express this true bhakti through the joyous service of all beings. Okay, so Jonathan, if you'd like to now lead us in discussion and thought.
Thank you, Jim, very much for that. Well, thank you all very much for coming on this for this presentation on Guru Yoga. It is very appropriate and very serendipitous, I would think, that we had the International White Lotus Day today. And you know how these days everybody has, instead of a birthday, they have a birth week. You know, it's my birth month. That seems to be the case with White Lotus Day, because we started White Lotus Day a week ago with quite a few lodges, and then the international version of that happened today. And I was fortunate enough to attend, obviously the one last week for San Diego. It was a magnificent presentation. One person even mentioned it as almost like a sacred event. It was so sacred that nobody wanted to say anything afterwards. And then I was fortunate that afternoon to hear on Zoom the New York Lodge one. And it was so devotional, and it mentioned the Mahatmas, and it really mentioned put HPB in the light of a servant and of a loyal worker on behalf of humanity, and also for the sake of the Mahatmas and for the sake of the future. So that was a really fine thing. And then today, the presentation was just so devotional. There was readings read in many languages all throughout the world. And the way people read their readings and the tonality that people put into their readings was very moving. And the talks as well, for sure. The ULT is, it's onto Guru Yoga. It's on to the idea of teachers and teachings. It's on to the idea of human perfectibility. And that some people would say that we lionize HPB. And well, why is that? Well, the first person to lionize her was William Q. Judge, when he said that she was possessed of the wisdom that belongs to but lions and sages. But this is the idea that honoring teachers does us good. As Nandini Iyer would say in her incomparable White Lotus Day talks, she would always say that it doesn't, we're not doing this to help the teachers. We're not doing this to help William Q. Judge or, or Crosby or HPB. They're gone. This is when we come in and we commemorate these great beings, we're commemorating their life, but it's what it's doing. We're the benefactors. In other words, thinking about and basking in the light of the example of a great being has this incredible, dare we say, magnetic effect on the student. So today we will take a look at what Guru Yoga is, and we will say a few things about what it isn't, but mostly focus on what it is. And I would also like to kind of postulate that it's actually the heart essence of what the ULT is. And because I would like to postulate that the ULT is fundamentally an oral tradition. And a person could say, what are you thinking? There's books everywhere. And have you ever tried to move a theosophist? You have to go to the chiropractor afterwards. Why is that? Because they have way too many books. But in spite of all that, I'm saying that I'm postulating here, I'm asking this group to think about the idea that it's fundamentally a transmission of sound. That's what happens in the ULT. And nobody knows, what's going to happen with the ULT, and if is it going to grow, is it going to shrink? All these things don't matter. What I'm trying to talk about is the archetype and of what the ULT, and it's fundamentally a transmission, I would postulate, of Brahma Vak, of it's the sound, the tonality of Brahma Vidya, really. And also that sound is transmitted as a vibration, and it's putting Brahma Vidya into practice. So when people come to ULT meetings, there's a whole lot of learning that takes place. First of all, hopefully they studied the assignment beforehand. And the degree to which they've studied the assignment probably, especially with devotion and reverence, is probably the degree to which they're going to get so much more out of the conversation that happens. But think about when we come to ULT meetings, the blessing, the darshan of all of the elders that have all of their lives been thinking about theosophy and have been trying to put these ideas into practice. And when we think of their comments and their questions, and also the privilege of being able to hear young people ask their questions, and the discussion, the back and forth, sometimes some would say even the banter, but basically the respectful dialogue that takes place, that's part of that oral tradition. And so to me, that's the essence of what Guru Yoga is. There is that image in the Upanishads of that. The very definition of the word Upanishad means to come and sit close. And that's what we do in our meetings. And the different occasions, different people are the teachers, you could say. But we're all teachers and we're all students at all times. But within that context, those who have been reading and thinking through these ideas, in that context, they are kind of the logos of the moment. And it's different every minute, every day, every theosophical study group. But there does seem to be a current and a currency of sound that goes through these meetings. And it's something very, very beautiful. And you could venture to say that this is planting the seeds for the civilizations of the future, because people are learning to think things through from different perspectives, from different points of view. And the more that we can have a dialectical diversity of points of view while working within the keynote of these teachings, the more it seems to me that that becomes the real basis of what a nucleus of universal brotherhood even is. And it'll make racism go away. It'll make caste systems go away. It'll make sexism go away, because we're beginning to honor each other as reincarnating egos. And that these meetings have an effect, a vibratory effect throughout the globe, and they will resonate into the future for eons, one thinks. So getting back to what Guru Yoga is, first of all, well, what is yoga? That's a good question, right? From my understanding, from my humble understanding, it's the union with the higher self. And there are different kinds of yogas. In the Bhagavad Gita, we have 18 different kinds of yogas. And the judge's version, there's 18 different kinds of devotion. Devotion by means of action, devotion by means of love, devotion, devotion by means of spiritual knowledge, etc., etc. Devotion by means of discrimination between the knower and the field. There's just all these different devotion by means of discrimination between the three gunas, for example. All these things are different pathways and margas, you could say, which means like a path. And Guru Yoga is one of them. And it seems that it can permeate all of the other yogas. There's almost an obscure article that a lot of people have not read, and it's called The Letter to the Haraf. And it was written in 1875, prior to the founding of the Theosophical Society. And it came out in a journal called The Spiritual Scientist, I believe. And HPB was writing many, many articles for many, many journals prior to the official inauguration of the Theosophical Society. And in that article, oh, by the way, anybody who has the CGP volume called The Beacon Light can find that article. And it's been retitled The Secret Science. So interestingly, see in that context, because that's actually a mantra that's in that article, The Secret Science. And by the way, the word theosophy is in that article. And this is prior to the starting of the Theosophical Society. So she's kind of making inroads, so to speak, with this idea of bringing to the world, theosophy. One of the intriguing things in that article is she talks about the difference between being a seeker and one who is initiated, basically. And I forget the term for the seeker, but the initiated person is a person who is made. Okay, so that's a very old term, this idea of being made. But she's talking about the idea that a person, I think she's talking about the idea that there is wisdom, that there are knowers, and that these knowers form a brotherhood. She's trying to introduce this idea that yes, there are mystics and there's mysticism all throughout the globe, but there is a secret science that permeates all of these systems. And she's trying to introduce this idea, and that she's saying that yes, a person can be a seeker through many, many different systems, but at a certain point, they need a teacher, a teacher who actually knows, and that the seeking never, ever, ever stops. So it's not like you seek and you seek and you seek, and then all of a sudden you find a teacher, and fine, after that it's an escalator. No, that hardworking uphill climb is always happening and it never stops. But there is a point when the student is ready for a teacher to appear. And that seems to be one of the main points of that article that she's making. The ULT seems to be a tradition of teachers, that it's all based on the idea that there is knowledge and that there are knowers of that knowledge. And that pretty much any and all students of the ULT, from what I've seen, is that they believe in the idea of the Mahatmas, that there is a brotherhood of Mahatmas, and that the people that we have come to respect and trust, like HPB and Judge and Crosby and so forth, that they were agents of those Mahatmas. So there's a specific body of knowledge that we're trying to discern and decipher and understand and put into practice, that's specifically called Theosophy in this case, and is the expression of these teachers, and has been issued into the Aquarian age, the age that we're in now, for humanity, because they felt like that humanity was ready for it at this time. There is the idea that we trust HPB, and we don't ever want to use HPB as a bludgeon to get somebody else to think something different than they already do, really. Well, HPB says this, your idea is wrong. But instead, it's something much more sensitive and much more intuitive and much more heartfelt than that, that HPB can be trusted. And the Mahatmas said of her that she was not perfect, but they trusted her. They trusted her as a loyal agent, because if HPB had nothing else, she had loyalty. Another reason that HPB can be trusted is that she said, don't follow me or my path, but the path that I show, and follow the beings who are behind the movement. So it's one thing about a trustworthy person, is that they can always cite who their teachings came from, and it's never themselves. Isn't that interesting? I've noticed that in my own life. People who say that they have a teacher, I trust them. I may not agree with everything they say or what their teacher says, but to me, that person is pointing beyond themselves. And they're saying that there's knowledge that's beyond themselves. That was a thing that happened in the Cranston book, where Damodar was traveling, and he found this female chela named Magi, M-A-G-I, not sure how to pronounce that. And he wanted to know about HPB. And Magi said that she said to him, you and I are both chelas. We are both teachers, students of the same teachers, the same brotherhood. And so is HPB. But HPB is not who we think she is. She is she's an initiate of the highest order. You can put all of your trust in her. I do. I trust her. You can too. And from then on, in the story of Damodar, he became quite an incredible helper of the Theosophical movement in India. because he put his full faith and his full trust in HPB. I'm going to read a little bit from a document called the Dyaneshvari today. And I'm also going to say a few things from Bhavani Shankar, who is another Chela of the Mahatmas, by the way. Bhavani Shankar, like as was William Kwan Judge. And he has some very interesting things to say about the metaphysics of Guru Yoga. And the Dyaneshvari has interesting things to say about, I would call it the metapsychology of Guru Yoga, what it's like, what happens in your heart and in your mind in thinking about the Guru, the joy of the idea of Guru Yoga, basically. And the Dyaneshvari, I'm not a scholar. I don't know exactly that much about it. Dyaneshvari is a kind of a poet saint, as I understand it, who lived in India. And he was born in 1275. And he died, as I understand it, in 1297. He only lived 22 years. And the Dyaneshvari, which is a very long treatise, much longer than the Gita, is a commentary on the Gita. It mostly talks about the Gita, but it also makes reference to the Vedas and the Upanishads. And that his poetry was written when he was a teenager, as I understand it. And it is something that is studied around the world as one of the authoritative treatises, on the Gita, right up there with the writings of Shankaracharya and so forth. And that kind of explains Judge's comment that the Gita is the study of adepts. The beings, the most remarkable beings that have lived over the last few thousand years, especially if they're tied in with India, have all been students of the Gita. So it's such a privilege that we can study the Gita, in the way that we do. So I am going to read a few things from Guru Bhakti, which is the title of the section of the Dyaneshvari that is actually in the Jewel and the Lotus. He starts off and he says, Guru Bhakti. Okay, what's Guru Bhakti? Well, he defines it right away. He says it's devotion to the preceptor. Guru Bhakti is at the root of all good fortune because it enables a man overladen with troubles to attain Brahman. So as the way it starts off in the 12th chapter of the Gita, which our Gita class will start next Friday, by the way, that starts off where Arjuna is asking Krishna, after he's seen the divine form of Krishna, he's recognized Krishna as the being that he is, as divine being. He says, Krishna, how is the best way to worship you? And Krishna replies, well, there's different ways, and to think of me abstractly is probably really more difficult. But you can think of me mentally, there's different levels. And he kind of has a cascading different level system of available options. And finally, if you can, the path of devotion is definitely a good path. You could say that there is some duality in it because you are somebody separate than what you're devoted to, right? But there are all these different levels and stages of devotion, really. And they represent higher and higher, more refined levels of unity with Krishna. And there is this idea of non-dual bhakti, where there is complete union with the higher self and with one's guru and with the logos and with Krishna. So that's like an ideal that permeates all levels of devotion. Now, one thing, and Krishna does say that it's something that anybody can do at this bhakti level. And well, this first sentence here is saying it's the root of all good fortune because it enables a man overladen with troubles to attain Brahman. If a person can find a person in this life that they can put their faith in, to work for, to help, to assist, it is the most blessed thing that can happen. Now, that's not always available in every life. Think about it. We live thousands of lifetimes. So all these kinds of devotion, all these different bhaktis, devotion, karma yoga, gnana yoga, all these different yogas, they represent different stages, probably in spirals, might think, in different lifetimes. So one has to choose, or probably one's own karma chooses it for you. What is the best for you? But what this is saying is that even a person who's overladen with troubles, they can bring these troubles to the preceptor. Okay. Now, once they begin to realize who this preceptor is, I don't know if they're going to overburden, their guru with all these troubles. But the thing is what a guru is an adjuster. It's a guide. The guru can't do any of the heavy lifting for you. You have to do that yourself. That's fundamental to theosophy. But the guru can assist. The guru can listen. And so even a person who has troubles, they have trigger points, they have psychological issues, they've got bad habits, they've got addiction. If they can find an elder, someone who they think is like an older soul, it's the most blessed thing that can happen. And to work for that person and to try and assist that person. Here's another sentence. As the Ganges carries all its waters into the ocean, as the Vedas seek to discourse on the attainment of Brahman, or as a devoted wife dedicates to her husband her body and soul, so it is that the man of wisdom gives everything that belongs to him to his preceptor. So this is, from what I understand, this is the idea of giving everything you have to a preceptor. So you were putting basically everything you have at the feet of the preceptor. And it says in the Bhagavad Gita that not only are you giving everything that you have in a good way to the preceptor, but you're actually putting all of your failings and all of your faults and your shortcomings, you're not giving them to the poor preceptor, but you're putting them at the feet of the preceptor. You're saying, I let go of all these things. I'm not attached to all these shadows and so forth. I only want to serve you. So it's almost like an instant purification. There's nothing more purifying, quicker, more deeper than the idea of forgetting about yourself and giving everything you have to someone who you respect. And it's using the idea of the Ganges because the Ganges doesn't think, with all of its water, as I understand, it's like the second largest water system on the whole globe. It doesn't think, well, the ocean doesn't need my water. I'm just going to keep my water and do something else with it. The Ganges is doing what comes natural to the Ganges. It's giving everything it has to the ocean. Everything. And there's this beautiful image of the devoted wife who dedicates to her husband her body and soul. She's giving everything she has to her husband and her family. There's nothing more beautiful than that. She's giving everything away. And it's such a privilege to know someone whose heart can be made that pure. And any time that we meet such a person, it is a blessing. We can learn so much from it. And it isn't a thing about my personal identity. You know, I'm a man, so why do I have to identify with that or something? Well, we've all been men and women thousands and thousands of times. And to admire the poetic beauty of someone who completely dedicates her heart to someone is so purifying, and there's a tenderness to it that is a wonderful, beautiful thing to become attuned to. It's almost too difficult. Well, you know, there is the mythology in the Mahabharata, no, excuse me, the Ramayana of Sita, in the Ramayana, of her dedication to Rama. And even when Rama gets exiled to go into the forest, she's so devoted to him that she follows him to the forest and endures all kinds of discomfort, including the risk of being carried off by Ravana, etc. But she never forgets about Rama. Even when she's separated from him, Rama is in her heart. So it is something that it's just it's one of the most beautiful aspects, you could say, of the Ramayana story. It says he, meaning the disciple, makes his body the abode of devotion to the guru. The mind always turns to the place where the house of the guru is located, in the same manner as a woman thinks of her absent lover. He goes and bows even to the wind blowing from that direction. He tries to speak of everything which is located in that direction. He establishes his very life in the abode of the guru. And it is only by the command of the guru that he continues to keep his body in his native place. In several places in this treatise, in the Dhyānēśvara, it talks about the abode of the guru. And other places it says, if you know of anybody who is constantly thinking about their guru and about the house of the guru, which might seem strange. What's up with the house of the guru anyway? But one way that I might think of that is there's the Groucho Marx problem of I would not be a member of any club that would accept me as a member. Okay. It's kind of like a ridiculous self-deprecating thing that doesn't make any sense, but we do it all the time. And even when we meet remarkable beings, we don't believe our own eyes. But I think when we see the house of the teacher, we think, you know what, this is a real person. And they live at a house. And that their house, by definition, is some kind of a temple, because the teacher is one who knows how to purify an atmosphere and how to invoke reverence. And a temple is any place that is consecrated to the good, to the universal good. And so the fact that the guru lives in a house, you're talking about a temple, really. And there is something about a temple where you can actually believe your eyes. Whereas with a guru, you may not be able to believe your eyes, just like Arjuna. Remember in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 11th chapter, Arjuna says, I didn't even know who you were. I was playing you within sports, and we were joking around. He didn't believe his eyes of the actual divinity of the being that he was with. And having been shown the divine form, then he couldn't help it. It was overwhelming. But he realized that he was dealing with an extremely divine being. Speaking of Arjuna in the Gita and in the Mahabharata, the fact that Arjuna chose Krishna as his charioteer, that decision-making process is Guru Yoga, because he knew that he had to go to war with his half-brother Duryodhana, and he knew that on Duryodhana's side there were more armies. My understanding is that he was wrangling with Duryodhana about who would get Krishna's armies. And they agreed, well, let's just go ask Krishna. Duryodhana, which was much more utilitarian based in the way he was thinking, he thought he would position himself closest to Krishna by sitting near his head, because when they found Krishna, he was sleeping. Arjuna naturally gravitated to Krishna's feet. So when Krishna awoke, he said, why are you here? Oh, because we want to know who's going to get your armies. And then the question is, who gets to ask first? But Krishna says, well, since my eyes landed on Arjuna first, he gets to ask the first question. Arjuna says, I just want you. I don't need your armies. Duryodhana couldn't believe it. But think about the magic of that. That's the magic of Guru Yoga, I think. So that is like, and that kind of resounding resonance throughout the Bhagavad Gita is the Guru Yoga of the Bhagavad Gita. The fact that Arjuna had chosen Krishna, that sets a tonality for the entire book. And all of the 700 verses in that book, and Arjuna's journey, that process that he goes through. And you could say that the Bhagavad Gita is really a treatise in Guru Yoga. There is one of the passages in this Dyaneshwari treatise where it acts like that that it's the height of intelligence for a person to have extreme reverence for the guru. And some people might kind of mockingly and scoffingly say, well, I think for myself, I don't need no guru. Okay. And you can hear that a little bit in Theosophists sometimes. And there's probably a health to it a little bit. The idea of individuation, not being simian and monkey-like and just copying everybody and repeating a bunch of other things, platitudes and things that other Theosophists say. But if we can communicate anything in this little presentation, it's the idea of the connection between wisdom and Guru Yoga. Bhavani Shankar talks about 4 different margas in his Doctrine of the Bhagavad Gita, treatise on the Gita. And there's Karma Marga, Abhyasa Marga, Jnana Yoga Marga, and Bhakti Marga. And in this context, actually Bhakti is the highest one. The first one is Karma Marga, where you learn control of your own senses and of your own body and your instincts. And the way to do that is through action and the Karma Marga, where you dedicate and concentrate all all the energies of your body and your mind to humanity, and you renounce the results. And that's karma marga, you could say. Some people would call it karma yoga. Then he says there's abhyasa yoga. What is that? That's the yoga of practice. What is practice in this context? He says that is when you daily set aside a place and a time for meditation and self-study. And that's when we can begin to control the mind, actually. Because just setting up the habits of the biorhythm of the body and so forth, of a place and a time that's consecrated for meditation and self-study, it increases concentration, and it makes it so that everything else that we do throughout the day, we are more efficacious at it. Then he says, during the self-study, the extension of all self-study really is manifold. But one aspect of self-study is the study of the scriptures. And that is the refinement of jnana marga, jnana yoga. And that is where you learn to use the mind, and he calls it the penetrative intellect. HPB says that the secret doctrine is jnana yoga. So it's the use of the mind, right? But it isn't just the use of the discursive mind. It's learning to see into the hidden kernel of everything. And that's one of the beautiful things when Wadia talks about how to read the secret doctrine. He says you want to get into the mind of the author. See, that's getting into the hidden kernel. Or when we say that Judge could talk theosophy to the mind of a child, or could talk to explain theosophy to the deepest minds, like the deepest unfathomable oceanic depths, the Judge could go either way. That's because he was able to penetrate to the hidden kernel of theosophy. That's a real jnana yogan. Then when Bhavani Shankar moves from jnana yoga to bhakti yoga, that's when it gets really, really interesting. Because he says with that penetrative intellect, you ask yourself, what is the self? What is the self? And you follow that, and you get to the essence of what the self is. Then he says that you do the same thing with the idea of a guru. What is the essence of what a guru is? What is the essence of what the guru is discoursing on is? And you begin to see that the higher self in yourself and the higher self in the guru is the same thing. And that both are expressions of Ishvara. Okay? And then he says that you begin to see in the guru the Ishtadeva. And that is your self-chosen deity. So in a way, guru yoga and deity yoga, there's quite an overlap between them. In deity yoga, you're thinking about the highest, most abstract spiritual essences of a given deity. And by thinking about that, that starts to wake up and awaken those energies within yourself. With guru yoga, you're doing the same thing. And the degree to which a person can admire the blessing and the darshan and the wisdom and the power and the tapas, okay, of a guru impersonally, okay, that's the trick. And I think that's what was so beautiful about these last three remembrances of HPB. In a lot of ways, they were impersonal. They talked about her loyalty and her dedication in some contexts, it was almost putting her in the light of being a bhakti before anything else. Sure, of course, she was this amazing Kshatriya warrior, but above all, she was a bhakti. But do you see how this is? It's almost impersonal. You're just tuning in on these universal essences and these amazing qualities that are capable within a human being. And that's what is so precious about recognizing the brilliance of a teacher. But I've spoken long enough.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. You gave us a whole panoply of thoughts in relation to yoga, bhakti yoga, guru yoga. So we have excellences to admire and much to think about. And so we now open it up to anyone who has questions. Please be sure and raise them. Or if you have comments to make, also share your comments or what you've learned yourself about guru yoga in your own studies and reflections. David.
Okay, since nobody else is asking a question, I'd always thought that the 7 classical yogas, as they're expressed, for example, in the Gita, are avenues. They relate to our sevenfold nature in a way, and that we need to practice them all simultaneously. Could you address that in some way?
I have a problem in this room that I can't hear the speaker. Ken, do you know how to get on my computer and turn up the Zoom? Because I think the problem is in the, and also you can do that.
Can you repeat your question, David?
Of course. Maybe I can streamline it a little. Is there a sense in which we need to practice all the yogas, Jonathan, simultaneously? Because each of them relates to, as you were kind of describing, the mind and the bhakti and karma yoga, aspects of our nature and our life simultaneously.
Yeah, it's a very good question. Could you hear it, Jonathan?
Yeah, I did. Do you want to take that up, Jim, or do you want me to do something?
Oh, you respond. If I have something to add, or I will. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, well, it's a very good suggestion. It isn't just one at a time. It's a both and all the above. But don't you think, David, that we find ourselves in different karmic situations where we can learn the most in following different paths or different margas? Like you, for example, you seem to be onto light. And right? The photographers would be that way, right? And so in other words, and anybody who kind of explores the genius of something in their life, they're onto something. Something's going on with that, right? And I'm sure you thought about that, but not just you, but everybody. And different karmic situations. Think about how many lifetimes that we've done in the last 18 million years. Hundreds, thousands, really, tens of thousands. And just as we know different people who seem to almost specialize in different kinds of learning experiences and opportunities, just so it must be true of ourselves, don't you think?
I do, but I was thinking of it more a little differently. For example, you're using my profession as an example. That's okay. To do that, you have to practice bhakti yoga. You have to be devoted to what you're doing. And you have to think about it at the same time. You could say that's an aspect of jnana yoga. And of course, action and reaction, acting in the world is, you could call that karma yoga. So that's more how I meant it. Sort of, we have to practice all the yogas, and when we fall short in one of them, maybe we need more development in that area, while we may be more proficient in another area, as you said, because of past experience.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Well, it would seem that this is a very telling and helpful point, because it also shows that the three different bhaktis, for example, mentioned in the Gita, knowledge, action, and devotion, are not serial. They simultaneously exist. Furthermore, they're beautifully interlaced, so that if one begins to cultivate bhakti yoga, for example, it's going to have an influence and a transforming effect and making knowledge more possible. And also it purifies action. And when one becomes more concentrated and responsible in action because it's needed in a particular situation or orbit of responsibility that we have, it's amazing how when the action is done with a sense of what is right and helpful and appropriate, it does summon forward some insight and knowledge and understanding. And it also strengthens bhakti too, and makes it more impersonal and more genuinely an expression of love. So it's something very beautiful in that. And two, when you think of it in terms of guru yoga and the disciple consciously giving his trust and his loyalty to a guru, one of the things he does naturally is begin to contemplate the qualities of the guru. And the more he can think in terms of the universal resplendent qualities of the guru, hidden in the depths of consciousness, and become aware of the fact that the guru himself, if he's spiritually illuminated, he is simultaneously living in and through myriads of human beings, so that the very effort on your part to reflect on the qualities of a guru, of a true spiritual teacher, is opening up the heart to be able to understand that just what the says in the theme for the week is that you begin to see love of the guru is meaning love of other human beings. And until you can expand the circle of loving other human beings and becoming more knowledgeable and more committed to action, then to that extent, you're going to be living in and through with the guru. So the differences between, as Jonathan mentioned earlier, the seeming separations is on our part. And when they begin to dissolve, there's a merging. It's very beautiful, a deep kind of marriage. Something very remarkable comes. And just as one Buddhist monk said, it's when I came to this simple disciple, and I just heard about this man, this being called the Buddha, and I didn't know who he was. I am a Brahmin, but I went and I spoke to this disciple who was in his saffron robes, and I said, can you tell me something? Can you point to where I could go to find this remarkable being? And he said, when I looked at this monk and I saw the radiance, the sweetness, the glow, the absolute total love of the Buddha, and the fact that he said, yes, I can help you. Right away, I knew this was real. He was so suffused by love and gratitude and admiration of his teaching that I knew it had to be real. And of course, he went on to become one of the great monks. But so it's just an example of how Guru Yoga can be contagious. It can affect people in such a way that it spreads. It has a wonderful fragrance and influence. Judy.
Yes, thank you for this wonderful talk and comments. I just wanted to make clear, and I'm sure we think in this way, perhaps in different ways, but there is one lodge of gurus, one lodge of masters, and these masters point to the ideals of theosophy, not to themselves personally. And I think that's so important to emphasize about Guru Yoga, that even though the lodge is one, there are different approaches to it. And there are also people who have perhaps nothing to do with theosophy outwardly, who serve mankind, as HPB pointed out about Father Damien, that at the moment there is a being in Los Angeles who is also a Catholic priest, Father Gregory Boyle, who does a work in helping gangbang kids whom everyone else gave up on, and he's had enormous success. He's also had some tragic failures, and I just read his book called Tattoos of the Heart. I mean, this man is a theosophist thoroughly. He is a priest, but he is a theosophist. So we have to honor people like this who are perhaps unwittingly doing the work of the master, though they may belong to a different tradition.
Indeed. Anyone like to comment on what Judy was saying?
A beautiful thing that I think I've noticed about the ULT, at least the ideal of it, is that the ULT really tries to be a reflection of the Great Lodge, the ideal of it. Doesn't matter what's about the practice, but the ideal of it is that when students work together and they keep in mind the Mahatmas, just like Judge says in one of his articles, Theosophical Work, things like that, lodges, he says that the lodges that keep in mind in the minds and the hearts of the members of any given lodge the idea of the Mahatmas, and they don't conveniently ignore the Mahatmas, because sometimes for newcomers they're worried, well, why are we talking about these Mahatmas? Because it sounds weird to the newcomers, because they're like, Theosophists are into these people that they never met, and they just talk about these Mahatmas and these teachers, and the whole thing's weird. So they're worried about newcomers are going to think like that. So some lodges just avoid the idea because it's just inconvenient. Let's just talk about karma and reincarnation and forget about all this. But the thing is that Judge is saying that that's fine, but your lodge is not going to flourish. So if you don't want your lodge to not flourish, then fine, go there. But the thing is if you, and basically Judge is saying the theosophy is so awesome that there's no reason why your lodge shouldn't grow. But it has to do with honoring and being forthright and loving the idea that there are these great beings, that there's this that the Lodge of Mahatmas. And when students come together and they try to get to the truth of what these great teachers are trying to offer, they're creating at that moment, at that time, an instant Sangha, as was mentioned before. And that Sangha becomes like a mirroring on this plane of the divine ideation of the Mahatmas, because they ideate in harmony these universal ideas. And when we try and come together, we're mirroring that. And not only is there a mirroring, but there's a relationship between the two lenses. The Mahatmas are a lens, and we become, at least temporarily, an instant Sangha, and we become a lens. So there's the mirroring of that universal brotherhood of the Great Lodge on this plane.
Robert, did you have a question or a comment?
Sort of have both.
Okay, go ahead.
I was thinking about James Colbert, Jonathan's father. His conception of the United Lodge of Theosophists was that it encompassed any, like in this declaration, it encompassed all people, as it says, who are dedicated to the true service of humanity, and in some way try and understand the basic principles of human nature and the cosmos. So always like that all-encompassing idea of United Lodge of Theosophists. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to attend a lodge, because the lodge itself would be in sympathy with all those beings on the inner plane. So that's just a comment. The question is, although in some ways the whole conversation has been about this, but I wondered if you had any specific comments about Guru Nanak's assertion that through faith in the Guru, the true self is known.
You know, when Jim said that by thinking about the qualities of a guru, there's an opening of the heart. And I wanted to ask him more about that. Jim, do you mind if we toss Robert's question over to you, and then my question about this thing about the opening of the heart?
Yes, yeah, just a second. I'm looking. There's something I wanted to read. Seem to have lost it. Oh, here it is. Yes. To me, this was extremely helpful, and this is what made me think of this, because keeping in mind that it would seem that theosophically, as one understands it, when we're speaking of the heart, we're really speaking about the center, the fullness of the center of consciousness, in which all the creative powers and virtues reside, and all the purest kind of qualities, as well as the purest kind of ideation. So the heart illuminates all aspects of the human being when it's lit up. Now, but when I was thinking about this theme, Jonathan, I remembered, we had the initiation in immortality way back in February, and Elton gave a superb talk. And I went back and I read it, and I just found initiation in its most hallowed meaning must always involve the merging of minds of Guru and Chela into a state of oneness with what? With the ineffable source of divine wisdom. The more the disciple, the Chela, diminishes, attenuates a sense of self as a personal separate identity, the more he becomes filled with the thought and the qualities and the virtues and the contemplating the oceanic consciousness of the Guru, the more he changes the ratios of thinking about the teachings, about the purity of the Guru, about the disciples of the Guru, about all those who are influenced by the Guru, all conceivable beings influenced by the Guru. The more that becomes real to him, the more he becomes one with the Guru, and they're both being lit up by the Logos. So the Guru becomes the means by which the Chela can grow into, release in himself or herself, that deeper heart that is the soul of the human being, and they can experience, because to experience the divine is to be aware of, is to live through great beings and every other kind of being. So it just seemed to me that that's something that made a lot of sense.
Well, thank you.
Ken, did you have a question or a comment? Yes. Can't hear you.
I guess you need to come over here and
Let me try it this way.
you want to just sit in the chair?
Oh, Laura, I'm sorry. I missed, didn't you have your hand up?
Yes,
I
Jim?
did. But in listening intently, I've kind of lost the thread of my thought, other than remembering what Mr. Judge says in The Ocean about man, the most intelligent being in the universe, has never been without a friend. And the line of elder brothers who continually watch over the progress of the less progressed. And the reason why they do that, and the reason why it's important to think about the masters, is because they exemplify our own potential, and that they wouldn't waste their time with us if we did not have the same potential that they have. And so it's all about the process of becoming. So as was said in a previous talk, that we're, in regards to Buddhism, that some people are striving to become Buddhists and some people are striving to become Buddha. And that there's a difference there. I thought that was an excellent comment, to recognize our potential. And the other thing ULT does is it gives us all the opportunity to work as the masters work, or theosophy, to the degree that we can, regardless of our condition, or organization. So it's an opportunity to work for humanity and for theosophy.
Yes, and I might add, if we read the Allegorical Umbrella by Judge, the contemplation of any ideal that's transpersonal, that lifts us above ourselves and sees ourselves as part of a wider, sacred, expanding circle of humanity, any ideal that does that allows us to have a stronger connection with the vast brotherhood of adepts, which are legion, and therefore humanity reconnects with the adepts, which it was naturally connected to when there was a lighting up of Manas, and for a long period of time. So all the shadows in between are what humanity is now struggling with. But anyone who resonates to an ideal that goes beyond themselves and goes into the social, the civil, it doesn't matter what, nature, anything that's expansive that way is going to help one nurture a connection with invisible members of the Brotherhood of Bodhisattvas who are engaged in helping humanity ubiquitously. So now, I'm sorry. So Ken, this will be the last question or comment.
Yes. It's the issue of the chela, or the guru, of the student becoming, falling in love, you might say, with the guru. And I
Yes.
was wondering, as we mold ourselves and make ourselves into people that can help the rest of humanity, how we can view this very popular idea that's in music of someone that they sing songs about unrequited love. And some Shakespeare stories are about this too. And it's a theme in popular culture. And it's like, is that unrequited love and that heartbreak of that person, can that be seen and can that be used as a pathway to get them to have a more profound love for someone that is a guru, or say they can continue to use that loving quality and not let go of it and become jaded and cynical? So how can we take the person like Olivia Newton-John, who's singing a song hopelessly devoted to you, even using the word devotion in her song, but yet it's a plaintive, sad song. And can we, in some way, shape, or form, how can we help that person transform that and not give up hope and become and not become jaded and cynical, and yet move onward to then attach themselves to someone that can really help them, like a guru or a master?
It's just interesting you bring this up, because really one of the things we have is that we have probably such a truncated, confined notion of love to begin with, that it's sad, because truly when you think of love and you think of it as a reflection of cosmic eros, love is giving, it's not receiving. Love is the fact that you have immense capacity to love, to cherish, to treasure, to honor. And we keep thinking, oh, I won't have love until I find this or that. No, you have abundance of love. You have an ocean of love in every single heart. And its very nature is to express itself, to give, to honor, to celebrate, to respect, to cherish. All these things are expression. It's the giving. And we make people think they're deficient or that you lose a romantic love. But no, there's so much more. And even loving one person, if you love them correctly, if you love them in the way the ancient Chinese spoke about, through gesture, through look, through touch, through tone of voice, then it's a beautiful love in which the macro is in the micro, the cosmic is in the particular. That particular person and that particular being and that particular set of relationships are so exalted compared to most of ours, where there's such a wonderful back and forth of affection and joking and making light, and self-correcting and so forth, that it's just something beautiful to see. And love is giving, and it gives without any expectation. It doesn't need to be requited.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Jim. I really appreciate that. That
Sure.
can be the lesson we can show to others.
I think we've come to our time. Jonathan, if you'd like to take us to the end of the meeting, and again, thank you again, Jonathan, for both your thoughts, sharing with us about the Dishmati and the Guru Bhakti and Guru Yoga. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Jim. And I think next week our topic of electricity has to do with this kind of this field of love that Phohat can be an expression of. So next week, electricity. Thank you, Jim, for helping us out.
Certainly, you're very welcome.
Jonathan, I just wanted to say that was very elevating and beautiful talk you gave. You touched on so many points, and it's very much appreciated.
Thank you, Kirk, very much. Thanks, everybody, for coming.
Great. Thank you, Jonathan. Wonderful.
Good night,
talk.
everyone.
Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks, everyone.